This is a $40 bottle of whiskey. This is a $140 bottle of whiskey. And this is a $340 bottle of whiskey. I've reviewed a couple of more expensive than usual whiskeys, and it's got me thinking, what is the deal with the massive increase in price from 10 to 13 and from 13 to 15? And is it worth going up? And where is the sweet spot? It's all so much to think about. I'm Conrad. This is Whiskeybonded. Stick around and I'm going to give you what my thoughts are on this and maybe save you a whole lot of money. So as you've already probably figured out, I have a Russell's 10, a Russell's 13, and the new Russell's 15 year here. I said I wasn't going to buy it, but thanks to a local liquor store owner, I picked one up. It was a pretty reasonable price, if you can call it that. But here's the bottom line. Russell's 10 is an easily available, about $40 bottle of bourbon. That is one of the best values in bourbon. Russell's 13 came out a year or two ago, and it was really, really fantastic. I'm a big fan of this one, as you can see by the level of the bottle. And even then, when it came out at a price point of $150, I thought, man, this is getting kind of crazy. 3 more years and the price goes from $40 to $150? That's nuts. And then Russell's dropped it on us this year and said, well, why don't you try this on for size? We're going to get 2 more years added on there, and we're going to jump the price by a boatload. Now, I said it was $340, but technically it's $250, but good freaking luck. Most places are selling it for $3 to $350. That's just the reality of it. But maybe here's something you didn't know. The Russell's 15 was actually released in greater volume than the Russell's 13, but the hype has been more than I expected it to be. The liquor store owners that I've talked to said that it is absolutely sold out, which is just nuts given the price point. But there is also some good news, I guess. It does control the secondary market a little bit, because how much more are you going to mark up a bottle that's already $250 to $300? So it seems to me like the small liquor stores and the large liquor stores are probably within about $50 of each other around here. Now, that doesn't stop some of those crazy asses out there from asking $700. It's bound to happen, and I'm sure that you guys have seen it. But what are we dealing with here, and what do they like? So I'm going to run through them really quick, tell you my thoughts, and give you what I think is the sweet spot on these 3 bottles, and which one I think that you should buy, and which one of these I'm going to buy again, and which ones I'm not going to buy again. So I'm going to start with the Russell's 10, obviously, because the Russell's 10 is going to have the most subtlety and least strength in its notes, and you would want to start from the weakest to go to the strongest. Like I said, Russell's 10 is about a $40 bottle. It is 90 proof and 10 years old, making it an incredible value, up there with just about anything to be able to get a 10-year-old wild turkey product for only about $40. On the nose, it's actually quite complex for a fairly low proof and fairly inexpensive whiskey. It is typical bourbon, vanilla and graham cracker and caramel. There's a very slight leather and a slight oak note to it, but they're subtle and it's super easy to drink. On the palate, I get caramel and vanilla with a slight oakiness. A little of that leather comes back. There's some spiciness to it that permeates the middle of the palate, but it's subtle, just enough to make it interesting. It's in no way hot or spiky. It's actually quite easy to drink. So much so to the point that as an experienced whiskey drinker, I really find the Russell's 10 to be not super compelling anymore. But for a new whiskey drinker, this is an absolute must try, and I suggest that if you're a new whiskey drinker that you absolutely grab a Russell's 10 and give it a go. Most likely, you're probably not going to see or delve into the higher ranges, but it'll give you some semblance of what the Russell's lineup is like. Finish on it is medium with spice notes that go to leather and wood and then end in sweet notes as the spice kind of dries with a slight drying on the palate, leaving behind vanilla and sweet powdered sugar. It's actually quite pleasant. With the Russell's 13, you get a bump in proof to 114.8 for this particular bottle. They do not proof it down anymore, so you get yourself a nice barrel proof. It is a lot darker than the 10, which is astonishing for the extra 3 years, and you do get quite a bit more complexity and more oomph to the flavors and the nose and the finish. On the nose on this one, I get a nuttiness that is not in the 10 as much. There is cinnamon and fig, a little bit of orange, and some of that Russell's Reserve characteristic kind of earthen notes starts to come out. The palate is much brighter, much bigger, with some bruleed sugar notes and cherry, a candied orange, and a little bit of a chocolate-covered peanut note. The finish is baking spices and tobacco, and a chocolate note that is accompanied with some oak notes. There is Really not much bitterness to this. It's a lot of sweetness. It's incredibly pleasant to drink. I really, really enjoy this one. And at $150-ish, it is expensive, but it becomes a lot more compelling. And you see what some of the jump in price is over the Russell's 10, especially as an experienced whiskey drinker. It has a lot more to offer. Now on to the Russell's 15. This one has come with a hell of a lot of hype and a ridiculous price point, in my opinion. I really wasn't going to do it and had to be talked into it, but I knew you guys would want to know, should you go after this probably $300 bottle? For $300, you get a bump to 117.2 proof, an extra couple of years, but a huge bump in the intensity of the flavors and the smells on this one. It's very, very dark in the bottle. It's got a beautiful packaging. I love the blue notes in the label. The darker blue colors is a great indication of the deeper flavors, the darker color to the whiskey in comparison to the 13. I think it's a very cool visual representation. The Russell's 15 has an intense nose to it. It's intense oak and vanilla and caramel and a little bit of clove. But the intensity of any one of those notes does not jump out a ton. Right when you think that oaky note is going to be overbearing or too bitter, a vanilla and caramel sweetness comes in to balance it out. It has a nose that is intense in a way that you might find on, say, a Michter's aged product, Michter's 20 or the Old Forester 1924, a very pungent, big, bright nose. The palate is a slap of cherry, sweet raisin notes, maple syrup, tobacco, and an oakiness that is definitely in there. It permeates throughout, but it's not overbearing, and it's not what I would consider bitter. Even though that slight bitterness of the oak tannins is in there, it is so well balanced out that I would not describe it as a bitter tasting note. The finish is chocolate and cherries, molasses, kind of an oaky note, and tobacco, but again, all very sweet versions, sweet oak, sweet tobacco. Incredible pour. This is a rich, impactful, and impressive bourbon. Now, let me give you my summary of thoughts. Yes, the Russell's 13 and Russell's 15 are in a completely different echelon from the 10. The 10 to me is a fantastic beginner's bourbon, but I moved away from it very quickly as I become more experienced, and this is probably going to be my last bottle of Russell's 10. A lot of you are going to hate to hear that, but there are other more compelling bottles that I would buy in low price points. I bought some Old Granddad 114 today as an example. It's delicious for the price point. It's complex for the proof, but it becomes less and less interesting the more things you try. Like the first time you try a Russell's 13, you're going to forget what Russell's 10 was even meant for and what the point was entirely. Even though the Russell's 15 is absolutely and subjectively the best bourbon of this group, it is the most interesting, it is the most balanced, it is the most deep of flavors, and the palate and the nose, all of those notes are deep and intense. They mingle together, they balance each other out, and it's a very impactful. It's one of those pours that takes the words out of your mouth as you're drinking it. For me, I will not be buying another 15. I will not be buying another 10. I absolutely will and have bought another Russell's 13. So the Russell's 13 for me is the sweet spot on this one. Russell's 13, yes, it's expensive, but with the prices of everything going up nowadays and there being so many more $100 bourbons than there used to be, with the new price point of the 15, the 13 starts to become very compelling. I hate to spend $150 on anything I'm going to drink this much of, but that's the bottom line. If these three are sitting on my shelf, I'm going to reach for that 13 more often than the other two. One, because the 15 is one of those things you're really going to have to sit down and ponder, whereas the 13 you can just enjoy. And also, the price point on this one is going to cause me to hesitate. I'm not going to reach for it as often because who wants to blow through a $300-ish bottle of whiskey? I'm not going to reach for the 10 because at this point, frankly, and please take this with a grain of salt, but as an experienced whiskey drinker, it's boring. It's just boring. You can't argue the price point on it. You can't argue that it's a great beginner's bourbon. You can't argue that everybody should have a bottle at some point or another in their whiskey experience. For me, I'm just over it. I don't need another $40 bottle of whiskey, and I will not be buying another Russell's 10. No hate. Best to worst, 15 is the best, followed by the 13, followed by the 10. If I had to scale them on a 1 to 10, I'd give the 15 a 9, I'd give the 13 an 8, and I'd give the Russell's 10 a 6. But, If you factor in for price, I'm going to have to go 13, 15, 10. Only because I'm not thrilled with the 10 anymore, but the 13 just starts to move ahead because of the price point that is roughly half. You're getting 80% of the experience of the 15 at about half the price. That's a hell of a proposition. And even though you could say the same thing about the 10 to the 13, again, I just don't find the 10 to have enough to compel me to want to buy it, even if the value proposition is huge. So there you go. There is a summary of what I think about the new Russell's 15 and how it compares to the 13 and the 10. I'm probably going to catch some hate for this because I know there's some Russell 10 lovers out there, but that's just my thought on the whole matter. If you've had all three, please add to the comments. What do you think? Am I completely off my rocker? Is the 15 worth every cent? Would you buy a $300 bottle of 15 every single time, even if it's the best one? Or are you like me and you're going to give some consideration to price and be a little more thoughtful to experience per dollar, let's say? Well, there you go. I'm Conrad. This is Whiskeybonded, and this has been my personal take on this crazy ass lineup that goes from, say, 50 to 300. 40, 140. You get the point. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. Stick around for more. And if there is anything that you want to see me do, just ask. You see how I reached for the Russell's 13? Love this stuff.